I'm sitting here this morning with David Abbott from the Penrith Symphony Orchestra. Good morning, David. How are you?
Hi Sebastian, I'm well, and how are you going?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Looking forward to Sunday. We have a concert of Italian opera music.
Yes, look, we're off to the opera this time. This is one of sort of the diverse concerts of the year. We have our symphonic series, but this one, as you've correctly stated, is an Italian themed afternoon. So we're kind of traveling through the 19th century, starting with Rossini, and then some highlights from Verdi, and then of course into the early 20th century with Puccini. So it's going to be sort of exciting, and I think it's good to kind of see sort of the progression of into across styles, because there's a definite evolution in that period. So it's going to be a great afternoon. I think we're starting at 3 o'clock, and we've also got four exciting soloists. So previously, when we've done highlights, we've often had a duo of singers, but this will allow us to do some of the bigger sort of quartet moments. So that's very exciting as well. So it should be a good afternoon.
Certainly will. Um, I guess for some of our listeners who are not that familiar with opera, can you speak to how opera singers actually train? Because it must be an immensely physical pursuit to be able to fill a whole hall just with your voice.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's a few other. I was going to talk about how to sort of approach opera if you're not, a connoisseur. Might be the word that some would use. But look, as to the singers, it's kind of interesting because we're very accustomed in the modern age to microphone singing, which is a whole art in of itself. But what a modern listener might not realize is that the art of singing has evolved like everything else with the change in technology and application. So as you're pointing out, singing to fill a large auditorium or hall is very different to, say, using a microphone or in the studio, and that sort of thing. And there's obviously that element of having to project, and also being able to do that in a way that doesn't sort of damage the voice.
Yep.
Typically an opera singer, even more so than some instrumentalists, will spend, if you start in childhood as singing, as most of us do as musicians, and even not, it's sort of the one of the original instruments, because you don't need anything else other than the voice to do it. But if you're starting in childhood, it could be 25 years of sort of progression to get to a point where, if you're going to be professional, that you kind of, most opera singers are a bit older. So if you're even studying, for example, you're looking at people who are, while undergrad instrumentalists might be, 18 to 25-year-olds, the singers could be sort of in that 20 to 30 category. And a lot of people, if we think of famous singers through the years, don't sort of aren't sort of premiering till they're sort of 30 at the youngest, because the voice has to mature. But it's a process, and it's technically very demanding to be able to do that.
Yeah. So, but for people who don't have much background in opera, do you want to kind of explain how opera really works?
Well, I
Like a bit of
think,
background? Yep.
yeah, sure. Look, I think I was going to sort of go down that path and talk about maybe the misconceptions that I think
Sure.
if you're not familiar with the form, there might be a kind of an idea that it's sort of not approachable, or that it's kind of an elitist form. But I think that essentially, like at a technical level, when you're describing what opera is, it's drama set to musical drama on the stage, or the drama and with a text set to music and performed. I mean, the other thing about it is that it's very diverse, because it obviously undergoes, as I was saying before, sort of an evolution of style. But I think what I was going to say, just addressing that misconception, is that somehow, if you haven't been before, or you'd never heard of it, or even if you think you don't particularly like the style, the thing I sort of like to say to people is that it's a very, and I think because of the musical aspect, it's a very direct form of kind of expression, and incredibly dramatic. That's the other thing about it that I think another way I describe it is that it's sort of a high, all art is somewhat heightened, I suppose, in terms of its expressive quality, but it's a heightened art form. So what I mean by that is that, it's very directly emotional, often melodramatic, but in the best of ways, and sort of very speaking directly at a kind of emotional level to, and sort of addressing like the big ideas and themes. So we can talk a bit more about that with some of the highlights that we're looking at, and some of the subject matter. But I think the idea that somehow you have to kind of have a deep understanding of it, or that it's intellectual or elitist or anything like that is you don't need to worry about that, because I think, in terms of the impact of the music and the excitement and all of that sort of thing, it can be an exciting thing, and just you can take it as it comes. You don't need to know a lot about it. You don't even have to know what the person's singing, because usually it's very apparent by the expression of the music and the sound and all of that.
So you don't need to be able to speak Italian fluently.
No, and normally, I mean, if you went to a full opera, and even in this case, you'd usually have subtitles or surtitles to tell you what's going on. But a lot of these stories, we're talking about, this is the other thing, it's usually dealing with universal themes and ideas. So once you have a kind of rough idea of what's going on, it sort of becomes very clear with the acting and, as I say, the music and the sound around you.
So, are you allowed to divulge which pieces of which operas we're getting?
Certainly. Well, look, I think most people. I'll start at the end, because I think the most approachable initially are some of the music from Puccini. So we've got a little bit from Tosca, and several arias from Madame Butterfly, and I think I start there because he actually got criticised, and is still to this day, by sort of critics and academics, because there's a sort of an accusation that his music is not serious enough or doesn't extend the form enough. But I think that's largely due to the fact that the music was immensely popular when it was released, and it still is today, because of it's immediately appealing, and it's got a real sort of visceral appeal, and people describe it in various ways. Someone said to me the other day, "Oh, it just puts you in the mood of, it's love, it's romance, it's the music of the night. It's very, you can physically feel it, and it's also dealing with the stories, because the Butterfly is one of the first operas in the Verismo style, which is just a more realistic style, so dealing with everyday characters with all the problems that we have, but incredibly approachable. And to give some context there, many people will actually know Madame Butterfly without knowing Madame Butterfly, because if they've ever seen or heard of the musical Miss Saigon, which is with some plot tweaks based on that opera, so it's the same plot. So that's where we'll start. And then we head backwards with some Verdi and some Rossini.
Right. So, one of the things that I think people may find, they already know a lot of these tunes. Those of us of a certain age certainly got a bit of opera education off Bugs Bunny. But I don't deride that at all, because it was an educational process that was going on with us.
I wanted to let you come in there, because I thought we were going to be heading in the same direction, and we are. People will be very familiar with, from Rigoletto, the La Donna El Mobile. If you've ever seen the pasta ad, that tune is very whistleable. You could, and in fact, the anecdote with that is that apparently Verdi thought that it was going to be such a hit. I mean, this might be a bit of kind of gilding the lily and kind of telling the story after, but apparently he rehearsed the tenor separately to the orchestra, because he thought this will be a smash, and I want to keep it under wraps, so I'm going to do that. Even the opening of our concert, because I'm coming back to other popular kind of tunes, the Barber of Seville by Rossini is very famous, and we're doing there is an aria from the Barber of Seville, but we're actually opening the concert with the overture, which many
Oh
people
wow.
will be familiar with. And
Yeah.
again, if you've seen Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny, those cartoons, all of this music is used in that context. And then most people probably wouldn't have heard of La Cenerentola, but that is Cinderella, and this
Hmm.
is an early Rossini opera. But that story is familiar to all. Again, with some plot tweaks to fit staging and to suit a story you're telling. But people will have heard that. And yeah, so again, very sort of, even though when people haven't heard this stuff, they can go and listen to it and go, oh, I know that tune, I've heard that. Whether it's a TV ad, a cartoon, a film, these things are recurring and appear in popular culture all the time.
Yeah, I mean that, and it speaks to the longevity of these of this form. I mean, I was looking at the program, and immediately I thought, gosh, everybody worked in Milan, and everybody worked for La Scala, and I thought we're going to have La Scala in Penrith for an afternoon.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and those things are kind of cultural icons because without knowing it, people will go, La Scala, that's familiar. They may not know that that's, the name of the
Yeah,
famous theatre. But, again, these things are there. And there's all sorts of sort of cultural connections with artists touring and making the music famous. What I was going to go to next too was just sort of the subject matter. I talked before about Verismo style, which is the more realistic, with sort of everyday characters. As we go back into the sort of earlier 19th century with Rossini and Verdi, they're much more like in a traditional form where you've got aristocratic or kings, queens, dukes, as lead characters. But often in the comedies, so if we're looking at, the Barber of Seville, for example, they're a farce on mistaken identity and the various love interests. And although some of the characters probably to our modern sensibilities don't come across as being very PC, there's usually a bad ending for the people doing the wrong thing. So there's that element of a morality tale. So it's no different to going and seeing films or literature in the modern age. And as I've alluded to before, a lot of the stories that are utilized in the operas are either recycled into modern art forms or directly used as a basis, like in Madame Butterfly, for example. So, yeah, that's another thing about the approachability of it, I guess.
yeah, right. So, well, it sounds like it's going to be a really, really interesting afternoon. And I'm sure, as in the usual case, the soloists that are appearing with the orchestra. Do we have? Well, tell me about the soloists.
Well, we've got 4 soloists from Opera Australia, which is really exciting. We have to sort of give us that variety. We've got a soprano, Imogen Faith Malfitano. We're very excited at Penrith to have her back because I think the years passed, but I think in 2022 we did La Boheme, another very famous Puccini opera, and she was Mimi. So that's the first time she'd sung that role. So that's the lead character in the opera. So that's going to be great. We've got Thomas Strong, who's a tenor from Opera Australia, and our baritone is Alexander Hargraves, and our mezzo soprano is Genevieve Dixon. I've actually got to think of the listing here, but 2 of them are actually lead artists with Opera Australia. I think Imogen is still one of the young up and comers, and another one of them is a member of the chorus. So we've got we've got the full representation of sort of different voice types. So you get to hear a little bit of everything. And as we said before, that gives us the opportunity to be able to do some of these larger scale arias and moments in the operas.
Fabulous, fabulous. I'm really looking forward to it. It's apparently the weather's going to be a bit so it'll be a terrific day to spend an afternoon in
Yeah,
a
it might
concert
be
hall.
might be a good day to come inside and enjoy some music.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Look forward to catching up. All right, mate. Thank you very much. Yeah,
Thanks, Sebastian.
as I said,
Great.
I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Yes, we look forward to seeing everyone at 3 o'clock.